Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. As you might have seen, over the past few months, a lot of vlogs have gone live from both Indonesia and the Philippines, which are the two countries that I was lacking on my Southeast Asian itinerary. Obviously, I would still love to go to Borneo and Sri Lanka, so I do still wish to visit those, but they are not always typically included in the general Southeast Asia backpacking itinerary. Over the past 3 autumns, I have split up my Southeast Asia trip because I only had about 2 to 3 months each time and I wanted to see as much as I could. So I started with Thailand, Cambodia and Malaysia. Then I went back to visit Laos and Vietnam along with another part of Thailand as well. And this year it was Indonesia and the Philippines. And I thought, why not make an overview of everything I have spent in total in Southeast Asia. Now, I feel a bit silly sitting here and repeating everything again in front of the camera, so I will be copy-pasting from the videos the individual guides that I have made before, going in depth about the budget of visiting Southeast Asia, sharing with you guys for every single country my budget for transportation, accommodation, food and activities, and of course a daily total. I am not the cheapest traveler, but I do try to stick to a budget as much as I can. Generally, when traveling to Southeast Asia, you can travel for about 1,000 euros a month, but for countries like, for example, the Philippines, that was simply impossible. So brace yourselves, because you will see a lot of different looks throughout the years. And at the end, I will also get back to you with a quick overview of the costs and kind of a slight comparison. Let's get started with the budget for Laos. Laos is definitely one of the most affordable countries in Southeast Asia to visit, with a daily average of 38.5 euros, consisting out of 7 euros for transportation, 5 euros for accommodation, 17.5 for activities, which I'll tell you a bit more in detail about, and 8 euros on food. Why is the daily spend on activities so high? Well, that's because I did the paramotoring, which cost 111 euros in total. I took a beautiful cooking class that was around 30 euros. I did the weaving class. I did lots of different crafts in Luang Prabang, which I absolutely loved so much about the city. I visited temples, I saw the Garavek Theater, the Kwangsi waterfalls, and I also did the tipsy tubing, which was a lot of fun. That also cost 15 euros. And then of course there were some viewpoints and lagoons, but all of those amounts were quite small. But still, even though I did so many activities and I definitely had a few drinks, the average is still quite low compared to other countries in Southeast Asia. Included in the 7 euros a day for transportation is 2 days on the slow boat. I rented scooters quite a bit. I also had to pay for the 30 euro night bus to get to Vietnam. I also took some trains. So yeah, if you're on a tight budget, Laos will be your best friend. Next up is the complete opposite, which is Singapore. Singapore has the name of being quite expensive, but luckily you don't have to spend too much time there. I spent 2 days and I spent 33 euros on accommodation a day, 12 euros on transportation a day, which includes 17 euros for a 2-day public transportation pass, and also 7 euros to get from the airport into town, which I definitely could have done that with the public transportation as well, and it would have been cheaper in the end. On food, I spent about 15 euros a day, which is a bit higher than I would usually spend, but it's not too bad, and you can have so much good street food. I had Indian food at Little India. I went to Satay Street and the food markets. So if you're eating at those places, generally you will be spending less than at a fancy restaurant. And for breakfast, I would just go to the convenience stores. So in total, I would say I spent 60 euros a day in Singapore, but that doesn't include the 40 euros that I paid to visit the domes. So technically that would be 100 euro a day. But I feel like Singapore is a city that you can easily also spend a whole day not spending any money, just paying for your transportation card and just doing some sightseeing around, which is also super interesting and doesn't cost you 40 euros. But I loved the flower domes so much, especially the Cloud Forest one. I would recommend to anyone going. Here is what I spent on my trip to the Philippines, which I want to remind you that I spent 1 month in the Philippines, and usually in Southeast Asia you can travel for 1 month for about 1,000 euros. Now in the Philippines, that was not the case. I spent 2,127 euros for my month in the Philippines. Obviously, I took flights, which I usually don't take. The flight from Manila to Coron was 118 euros. The flight from Puerto Princesa to Siargao was 83 euros. The flight from Siargao back to Cebu was 51 euros. But then I had to pay another quite expensive, more than 30 euro taxi to get to Malapascua in the same day, which would have been cheaper with the minivans and bus, but I just wouldn't be able to make it otherwise. So that was another 84 euro travel day. And then my flight back from Bohol to Manila cost me 62 euros as well. My flight from Indonesia to the Philippines was 54 euros. And then my flight back home was obviously more expensive, was in the 400 euros. So both the flights and all the ferries and all the tricycles and minivans and expensive taxis. In total, I spent 19 euros a day on transportation on average. So that's everything added up and then divided by a month. 19 euros a day on transportation. Then for accommodation, I spent quite a bit less. The accommodation in hostels was actually an okay price. I paid 10 euros on average per night. Some places were more affordable, like the islands around Cebu, Malapascua, Siquijor, and then others like Palawan were a bit more expensive, but still below 15 euros a night. When it comes to food, the Philippines does not have a very rich cuisine like of themselves. They do have some local dishes, but it's not like in Thailand, where I just love to have Thai food every day, all day, and there's so much variety. That is not the case in the Philippines, meaning you quite often will have Western food and eat some more expensive food, which brings my total for food per day to 13 euros, which is quite a lot in Asian countries. And then, of course, the biggest chunk of my money went to activities, because usually I try to save money on accommodation and food so that I can do more exciting things on the destination. I did a lot of diving in the Philippines because, as I said before, I wasn't having the best time at first. But then I knew one thing would really make me happier, which was diving. I love to dive, and the Philippines is definitely an incredible country to go diving. If anything, I don't think I would go back to the Philippines if it were not for diving. I started out on Malapascua, where I did 2 days of diving, 1 day with the thresher sharks and the second day the Gato Island dives and the night dive with the mandarin fish. Together they were 180 euros for the 6 dives across 2 days. Then continuing on to Malboal, I paid 44 euros for the Kawasan canyoneering tour, which was more than worth it. That was one of my favorite days. The next day in Malboal, I did another 3 dives, which cost me 73 euros in total, which is not much at all when you consider the price per dive. Then I did a day trip to Apple Island from Siquijor. This one cost me 115 euros, also including 3 dives and obviously the whole day out on the boat and food, etc. And then on Bohol, I spent 14 euros driving to the Tarsier Sanctuary and waterfalls and so on, and doing the sub boarding also on the Lobok River. And another big cost of something I already mentioned as well was the expedition, the island hopping from Coron to Palawan, which cost me 100 euros per day, and I did 3 days. This can cost you a lot more if you go with the big companies like Tao, but I did mine with El Nido Paradise and I cannot recommend them enough. So that is where all the money went for my activities. Of course, here and there I visited a waterfall, I visited a healer, but those things were not that expensive at all. Oh, and the surfing for 2 hours on Siargao, I paid 26 euros as well. So the average per day that I spent on activities in the Philippines was 29 euros, bringing my total daily average to 65 euros a day. That is a lot. That is more than even the most expensive countries in Central America, like Costa Rica. But I knew I had to get more out of my activities because there was a lot that I just didn't enjoy. And I had to wait for my flight home, so I just made it worthwhile and spent a bit more on diving and doing nice activities. So here are my daily costs for Thailand. In Thailand, they use Thai baht. You need cash pretty much everywhere except for 7-Eleven. So the average daily cost of transportation for me was 11 euros per day over 41 days. If I had taken buses instead of the flights, that would have been 6 euros instead of 11 euros a day. For accommodation, I also spent 11 euros a day on average, staying in a dorm room and those 4 nights in a private room. On food, on average, I spent 10 euros, but for myself, I really tried to stick to 7 or 6 euros a day. And then some days I just splurged, had a bit of Western food, and then I would quickly spend something like 20 euros a day. So everything balanced out to about 10 euros a day. But I tried overall to spend less than that. Then we get to the activities. Now I spent a lot of money on going out and on diving that maybe not everyone will spend. If you would also like to dive when you are on Koh Tao in Thailand, then definitely check the link in my description, because not only is Koh Tao one of the cheapest places in the world to go scuba diving, it is also where I did my open water diving course, and I have a 10% off link for you in the description. So you can get the cheapest but also a great experience for even less money. The activities, including nightlife and diving, were 20 euros per day. Minus the diving, that would have been 13 euros a day. My daily total budget for Thailand was 50 euros. This includes the flights, the diving, and the going out. Without the flights, my daily total would have been 64 euros, and without the dives, it would have been 54. So if you don't take flights and you don't like diving, your total would be more like 40 euros. In Cambodia, they pay with the Cambodian riel and also the US dollar. The Cambodian riel is annoying because there are so many bills that you carry around, and you have a purse full of bills, and then you get to pay something and you still won't have enough. Like, it still doesn't add up to enough. And you can barely pay with your card anywhere, which I found very annoying. Transportation in Cambodia, 10 euros a day. Accommodation in Cambodia, 6 euros a day. Food in Cambodia, 17 euros a day. Especially on the islands, there was no way of eating a lot of local food. So yeah, you definitely spend more on food and drinks on the islands. Activities including nightlife in Cambodia, 15 euros a day, and the total daily budget for Cambodia was 48 euros. In Malaysia, they pay with the Malaysian ringgit. In Malaysia, you can pay with your card a lot more than in Thailand or Cambodia. They also speak much better English. In the Georgetown video, I explain you a bit more about my first impressions and stuff like that. Average transportation costs in Malaysia per day was 8 euros. Accommodation, 10 euros a day in Malaysia. Food on average in Malaysia, 14 euros a day, which is in between Cambodia and Thailand. And I would mainly say it's because of Kuala Lumpur, because the amount of restaurants that you have there. It's just so tempting to go for a restaurant meal instead of the local food. Activities per day in Malaysia was only 3.3 euros. In general, I didn't do much when it came to activities. Pretty much everything was just walking through a city and exploring it that way, and I barely went out when I was in Malaysia. There is less alcohol and it's a lot more expensive because it's much more of a Muslim country. So yeah, I spent a lot less money on going out and activities in Malaysia. The daily budget for Malaysia is the lowest. In total, I spent 35 euros a day in Malaysia. Okay, this brings me to what I spent for 1 month in Vietnam. As I always do, I will share with you my average daily cost for accommodation, transportation, food, activities, and of course my daily total. On accommodation, I spent 6 euros a night on average. I did save a lot of money taking night buses, so a lot of nights I simply spent nothing on accommodation. The hostels in Vietnam are also some of the best ones. I liked all the hostels except for maybe Dalat Family Hostel, but that was mostly just because of the maintenance. Other than that, the staff is super nice. They have a free beer hour very often. Many times breakfast is included, and the breakfasts that are included are really worth it. All the people at reception are super well informed and can help you with any tour or transfer that you may need.
On food, I spent on average 8 euros a day, which is not much, but it definitely could have been less because I went all out when it came to food. I had so much food, I did not hold back. I had to try every single regional and typical dish that I could find in Vietnam. Then on transportation, I spent about 10 euros a day on average. This is mostly because of the night buses. But given that you are traveling such distances, 10 euros a day is peanuts. And then last but not least, the biggest chunk of the budget will go to activities. I spent on average 27 euros a day on activities, and I think a lot of that comes from the Ha Giang Loop. Aside from that, a lot of things you want to see are organized in tours, which costs a bit more rather than just doing sightseeing by yourself. Another amazing way to get to know the local cuisine as soon as you set foot on Vietnamese soil is by doing a food tour. I can highly recommend doing one in Ho Chi Minh City or in Hanoi when you first arrive. In total, that means that I spent 40 euros a day in Vietnam. This can definitely be cheaper, but I'm a bit of a comfort backpacker. I eat a lot. I don't stay in the cheapest places. I stay at the ones that to me seem like the best and are the most social.
What did we spend on our trip of Indonesia in a whole month? The local currency is the rupiah, and you will most likely be paying with cash. Whenever you take out money, try and take out as much as you can in one go, because that saves you on ATM fees. A lot of the times it was an extra 3% if you wanted to pay with your card. It was possible in more places than it was in the Philippines, but yeah, it's not always possible. So you must have some cash on you. And in restaurants, this was very surprising to me, but they often add on 10% tax and 5% service costs on any meal you get, which is also what makes the food then more expensive. We saw a lot. We did so much. There was a lot of transportation involved. We did so many activities. And we did spend a bit more on private rooms in hostels because we did want the social aspect, but also the privacy of a private room. On our private room, we spent 15 euros per person per night on average. For transportation, we spent about 10 euros per day. You can either see that as a scooter or when we had a whole day with ferries and like transfers, etc., it would easily be a 30 to 40 euro day. A train was also not the most affordable. It was anywhere between 15 to 30 euros as well. Flights can be pretty cheap actually. They can be starting from 30 euros, but if you book them a bit later or you're just unlucky, they might be a bit more expensive as well. So in general, 10 euros on transportation, 15 for accommodation. On food, we spent on average 13 euros a day. Some days we spent not that much at all, or it was already included in our activities, and others we did spend a bit more, like 20 to even 30 euros sometimes, especially in southern Bali and also in Labuan Bajo and Flores. We did spend a bit more on food, but 13 euros on average a day is not too bad, but I feel like we could have spent less, especially eating in the warungs, which are the local Indonesian restaurants. They have really good food, some stir-fried noodles. Yeah, some of our favorite meals in Indonesia were in the warungs, so you can definitely save some money on food if you want. For the activities, we spent a bit more. We did so much. We spent 26 euros per day on activities on average because, for example, the temples, Borobudur and Prambanan were 25 euros each. We did the dives in Komodo National Park, which were 180. So obviously that's a big cost. We did the 4-day boat tour, which we paid a bit more as well to have the private room. So that made it 65 euros a day. We did the 3-day East Java tour, which was also 40 euros a day. So in total, I spent 1,780 euros on a month of backpacking Indonesia. I was definitely not budget backpacking, and I just tried to do it well because I kind of knew that I probably wouldn't be going back there anytime soon. I do want to go to Borneo and Sulawesi and obviously Raja Ampat one day, but not really the places I've been. So I wanted to do it well. So that's why we spent on average 61.5 euros a day. That's one of the highest averages of what I've spent in countries backpacking so far. So I'm very surprised with that. I definitely didn't expect it, but it was worth it, especially the dives in Komodo National Park, the multiple day tours we did. They did make the whole trip. Alright, so after all of that, here is a general overview of what I spent for all of those months in Southeast Asia. When we compare the average daily spent, you can clearly see that Laos, Vietnam, and Malaysia were the cheapest countries to travel to, followed by Cambodia and Thailand, where I spent a bit more in general on food, but also on the activities. I did go scuba diving in Thailand, which I didn't do in any of the other countries. And then, of course, the most expensive ones were Indonesia and the Philippines. And personally, I believe that this is because they are islands. So you spend a lot more on transportation, either domestic flights or ferries, or just you're spending a lot more on transportation and getting to certain places or islands. I also spent a lot more on diving. I absolutely love diving. It's also what absolutely made my trip to the Philippines. I don't think I would have enjoyed the Philippines that much if I wasn't able to scuba dive. And obviously, I liked the food of Indonesia and the Philippines the least, meaning I probably had some more Western food. And yeah, I just wasn't really inclined of eating their local dishes every single day, which I do love about all the other countries in mainland Southeast Asia. So in total, without the international flights, this is how much I spent on my many months in Southeast Asia, exploring as much as I could. Obviously, in the future, I would love to go back, see some more. But for now, I hope that this has kind of given you an idea of what budget you will need for your trip. Obviously, you can always do this cheaper. You can sleep in the cheapest rooms, but those might not be the most social or safe environments for you to stay in. You can decide to just eat a 7-Eleven toastie for every meal, or just instant noodles as well, but that's such a shame, because what I loved the most was experiencing the culinary culture of these countries. Well, most of them. And when it comes to transportation, there's not really much to bargain with. Already in Thailand, for example, you can order Grabs, which are really affordable. In Vietnam, the night buses are such good value for money. And in the Philippines, there's just no way around a domestic flight. And if you're lucky and you book them enough in advance, then hopefully they aren't too expensive after all. So yeah, that is it for this Southeast Asia cost breakdown. I hope you found it useful. If you did, then give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you are excited to see my Balkan road trip going through Montenegro, Slovenia, Bosnia, Croatia. I will be doing another summer season on the sailboats in both Croatia and Greece, and then who knows what the end of the year will bring. Definitely follow along if you don't want to miss out on any of the next videos, and then I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!